My mother steals my apartment with false documents to please her fiancé with holes in his underwear. But now I have to decide whether or not to accept his call from jail. Here is some context. I grew up in a wealthy family, but luckily, I was not raised by my mother. She and her siblings were spoiled to the extreme, literally and completely disconnected from reality. My dad was the one who raised me for the most part. And although he did not keep me away from the family money, he did teach me to be modest and not to act entitled, unlike my mom. My mom always seemed different to me. I'm sure you already guessed it, but my parents are divorced, hence the configuration of my family. Luckily, I was old enough to decide who I wanted to live with, and obviously I chose my dad. Even before the divorce, my mom was not around much when I was little, as she was more focused on her social life and showing off her wealth than in being a mother after divorce. My mom didn't really give child support. It was thanks to my grandmother, my mom's mom, who never stopped giving me financial help. My grandmother has always been super generous, and I think she partly does it to keep me connected with the family. Despite my dad's influence, you will see every year, in addition to the financial help she gives me, these extravagant birthday gifts. Literally, they are gifts so extravagant that sometimes I can't even understand how someone can give so freely. She does this with me and all my cousins, and usually fulfills their birthday wishes, as long as they can be bought. However, I told her to just give me what she thinks I need. To be honest, I don't think I need more than what I already have. I am grateful to be able to eat more than 3 times a day if I want to study at a good university and have a loving and supportive father. Anyway, this year's gift, really. I was surprised. She gave me a penthouse, an entire penthouse for my 21st birthday. The penthouse is spectacular. I'm talking about huge windows, amazing views. And it's in an exclusive neighborhood. My grandmother didn't stop there. She even told me that she would. The renovation costs so that the place was perfectly customized to my taste. My grandmother told me that it was time for me to have my own place and be independent. The location is also good. It's close to my university and many good places in the city. My grandma is the best. Honestly, anyway, since the penthouse is far from where I currently live, and I'm busy with my studies, I asked my mother to check on the renovations from time to time, just to make sure everything was going well. She lives near the penthouse, so I thought it would be convenient for her to stop by. Plus, maybe that would give us a chance to have a little mother-son time, right? At first, everything seemed fine. My mom. She would send me short messages, like she is painting the living room or the bathroom tiles. They look good. Sometimes she would even recommend me what to do. In some parts, like what color to choose or what furniture to combine, nothing too detailed. But I thought everything was going well. She would even make video calls to me from time to time, something she hadn't done in years. Then in the weeks it became more and more difficult to locate. My calls were not answered and my messages were left unseen when I managed to talk to her. She didn't seem to pay attention to me, giving excuses that she was too busy or caught up with things. It's my mother, of course. So I believed her, and I was wrong to do that. My dad noticed that I was frustrated, and he warned me, saying that my mom is not exactly reliable when it comes to things like this. But I ignored him, not wanting to believe that she would screw it up. Then last week, one Sunday morning, I woke up to tons of messages from friends and cousins. They were sending screenshots of Instagram stories my mom had posted the night before. He uploaded pictures of my penthouse being renovated with her new fiancé, and friends, my mom's fiancé. Bart, a guy she met 6 months ago, was also acting like he owned the place and posted similar pictures on his social media. The place was completely trashed. There was food everywhere, on the expensive rugs and wine stains on the white furniture. It was obvious they had been partying all night. The worst part was the caption, "We love our new house is almost ready." I stood staring at my phone. Our house. What the hell was she talking about? This was my place. I didn't even give her permission to stay there, much less treat it like hers. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. She didn't even ask my permission. Of course, I called her right away. It took me several tries before she finally answered, sounding completely unconcerned. I asked her what she was doing in my place. Why not? He asked me permission, and why the place looked like a frat house after a Saturday weekend. She told me, "Relax." Yes, she did. She said with a tone full of entitlement, "It's just a party, we're celebrating." No, I was taking care of the place for you, you should thank me. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I told her I trusted her with my place, and she was trashing it and posting it online like it was hers. That's unacceptable, and that's when she gave me the worst answer ever. She asked me what the problem was, saying, "We're family. And since you're not using the penthouse right now, I thought it would be mine for the moment. I was making it look good, so I could show it off." Okay. I felt my blood boil, making it look good. She wasn't making it look good. I was ruining it for the love of God. I gave up. There's no point in talking to people who don't believe they're wrong. So I told her I'm going over there to see for myself and hung up before she could argue. As I headed to my place, I really hoped the damage was minor. But when I arrived later that day, my stomach dropped. The beautiful renovations I had been looking forward to for months were ruined. I don't know if I'm exaggerating or not. But what did I expect? I mean, my mom invited about 20 people over to the house, and they threw a huge party. Of course it was trashed. There were marks on the walls, wine stains where they shouldn't be, and trash everywhere. My mom didn't even clean up after she left. It felt like some stranger had come in, stayed in my place and trashed it. This gift was meant to be mine, and my mother just used it to feed her own ego. I had to tell my grandma, but she was on vacation, and I didn't want to upset her. Especially because of the time difference. I was so frustrated I decided to just leave. Just as I was going to open the door, someone opened it first. To my surprise, it was my mom's fiancé. Bart was still furious about what had happened. So I yelled at him, asking him what he was doing in my place. What surprised me the most was his answer. He said with these exact words, "What do you mean? What am I doing here? What are you doing here? This is my place for your information." He proceeded to forcefully remove me from my own place, slammed the door behind me and locked it, telling me to get lost before he called the police. I was too stunned to speak or move. I stood there in the hallway trying to understand how things had gotten to this point. He had really just told me to get lost. How did this happen? The last time I checked, this penthouse was mine. I bet he didn't even know who I was. I took a deep breath, swallowed my anger, and tried to stay calm. I knocked on the door again, this time calmer. He opened the door, just a crack enough for me to poke my head in, but not enough for me to get in. I asked him, "Do you know who I am?" As expected, I did not know, so I told him that I was the son of his fiancé, and that this place belonged to me because my grandmother had given it to me. And as expected, he had no idea. He said that my mother had told him that the place was his, and that she and Bart were going to move in there together after the renovations. My mother had actually told this man that the place was his. I could feel my anger rising, but instead of losing my temper, I tried to get to the bottom of it. I tried to reason with Bart, explaining that I was just asking my mom to check out the renovations, which did not mean that the place was his. You know what he did? He slammed the door in my face and told me to stop talking nonsense. My heart was pounding from how angry I was. My blood was boiling. I felt my hands starting to shake, but I couldn't allow myself to lose control. At that moment, I needed to think clearly how the hell he managed to convince this guy that the place was his. Why is my mom claiming my place is hers? I took a deep breath. I walked down the hall for a minute to calm down and then called my mom again. She didn't answer. I called her 2 more times before she finally answered. She even had the nerve to sound this like I was a nuisance interrupting her day after telling her what happened. There was a long pause on the other end of the line, long enough for me to realize she was probably making up some excuse. She then told me that Bart must have misinterpreted things, and that it wasn't like I was living there at the time. She sighed heavily, like I was the one being unreasonable, and said, "You've been so busy with school, and that big old penthouse is just there. I didn't see the problem in telling Bar that we could stay there for a while since you weren't using it. I told her the place is not yours to decorate or invite your friends without my permission. It is mine." But he simply told me to stop being so dramatic. And then the famous phrase stays in the family: what's mine is yours and what's yours is mine after that. He hung up. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. This is not how things work. Remember, I told you, my mom lives nearby. Well, I decided to go to her house and confront her in person. She didn't even try to apologize, acted like I was just overreacting, saying I was young, and didn't even need the place right now. She then asked me to let them enjoy the place, and they would fix it. Afterwards, I couldn't believe the nerve. So I told her I was no longer welcome at the penthouse, and that if she and her fiancé came back, I would have to change the locks. Of course, she got mad and told me I was being selfish and ungrateful. I didn't care. She crossed the line after that. She slammed the door in my face. I called a cleaning service and I started making arrangements to return the place to its original state. Update 1. It's been 2 weeks since the original post, and I remain firm in my decision to not allow my mom back. My place really crossed the line, and she didn't even apologize. Despite this, she continued to defy my request. As I mentioned, I told my mom not to come back to my place, but I kept getting news that she and Bart were coming back. They were throwing parties and inviting more people. I should have changed the locks right away, but I kept giving her the benefit of the doubt. I thought maybe in time she would respect my boundaries and stop crossing the lines I had so clearly marked for her. I was completely wrong. I tried to call her and text her, but they were all ignored. I wanted to confront her, but every time I tried to come back to my place, something would stop me, whether it was work, school, or life in general. Interfering, to be honest, a big part of me didn't want to face the mess again. I wasn't ready to see how much damage they could have done since the last time I kicked them out. But that thought ate at me every day. My own mother, in who I trusted to take care of my property, was trashing everything. The worst happened a week ago. I finally had time to visit my penthouse, ready to face whatever. But just as I was about to get to the elevator, the security staff stopped me, which was strange since they knew me and had been there many times before. But that day, their tone was different. They did not let me up. I was confused and asked them why. And that was when I heard the words that made my blood run cold. They told me that I was not allowed to go up because the owner of the penthouse had requested that I be denied access. I argued with them, insisting that it must be a mistake. That place is mine. My name is on the deed. I have the keys. But they still showed no interest, explaining that they value the privacy and security of their residents, some of whom are important people. If one of them gives a notice to ban someone, they do so, immediately banning access to the person who in this case was. I couldn't believe what just happened. My place is almost done with renovations, and I can't even get in. I won't let her keep treating me this way. Update 2. I spent the entire week after my last update trying to figure out what was going on. I moved heaven and earth to get to the bottom of it all. I contacted my lawyer. We went through the papers, and it was... So when I saw it, the title had been transferred months ago. My mother had forged my signature. And now it all makes sense. That's why Bart was acting so entitled. That's why the staff refused to let me in. I had my property stolen, and I didn't even realize it. She acted like she cared, and I really thought she was doing her best to honor my request. Trying to make up for all those years, she acted like she didn't have a child. I couldn't believe what my own mother had done. She actually did this. It made me nauseous. I mean, how long had she been planning this? She always intended to stay with what was mine, or was it Bark? Put the idea in her head with that. I realized that she probably stole the title to my grandmother's house. I guess it was my fault for trusting her. Although I don't really know her. The more I thought about it, the clearer it became. I wasn't doing this just for her. I was doing it to impress Bart, to show him that she had everything under control. She was so desperate to hold on to her life of luxury that she didn't care who she hurt in the process, not even her own son. The second week after my last update, I decided to confront. I managed to get into the penthouse after paying some employees of the building. Don't get mad. I had to. When I arrived, I could hear loud music from the hallway. I managed to get in because a stranger let me in. When I walked in, it was like walking into a nightmare. There were so many things smashed, and then I saw her. She was in the center of it all, laughing, with a glass of champagne in her hand. Bart was at her lad, or smiling, like she owned the place. At that moment, I realized something I had been too blind to see before. She didn't love me. She never did. I felt my hands grow cold as I closed the distance between us. She saw me coming. Her reaction, however, was what broke me again. She didn't even seem surprised. She knew what she had done, and she didn't care. She almost didn't seem amused, as if this, whatever it was nothing more than a mere annoyance to her. She gave me that same smile, the one she had used for years to ignore anything that didn't fit into her perfect little world, and then she shrugged. That was quite a shrug, as if robbing my house and forging my signature was just another day for her. It was hopeless, so I left without another word. But as I walked out, I made a promise to myself. I wasn't going to let her ruin my life. I contacted my lawyer that very night. We're going to contest the fraudulent transfer fight against forgery and get the property back. I was previously hesitant to tell all this to my grandmother, because I did not want to disturb her on her journey. I was thinking of waiting for her to come back. But I think she must be interested right now. It will not be easy, and will take time, but I am determined. She may have thought she had won that. I would just accept what she did because I am her son, and we are family. But she was wrong, very, very wrong. Anyway, apart from that, do you have any suggestions on how I should proceed in this matter? Update: 3 days have been passed since my last update in my last post. I mentioned that I would do everything in my power to get my property back, and let me tell you, that is what I have been doing. I have discovered many shocking things in the past few weeks that I can use against my mother. So let's get straight to the point, without wasting any time. I thought proving the forgery would be easy, but I focused on how I could get revenge on my mother. She has caused enough damage to not get out of these inconsistencies. I first thought about what was most important in his life and how I could take it away from him. Don't get me wrong, I wouldn't go as far as to commit a crime anyway. It was obvious that was what mattered most to him, his lavish lifestyle. And I thought he barely works. So where does he get the money from other than the trust fund that Grandma gave him, which I think is almost depleted by his lifestyle? And yes, I was right. That's when I found out that he was probably embezzling money from my grandma's businesses to give them some context. My grandma has many businesses from there. Her wealth. My mom works for her and manages some of those businesses. When I requested financial reports from her team, pretending that I wanted to learn what my mother was doing, I noticed what he had been doing all this time. He has been taking money little by little from businesses and covering it up by classifying them as legitimate expenses, for example. List computers for $2,000 when they should have cost half that, and my mom was doing it so well, taking small amounts over time that when you add it all up, it's probably already on fortune. It was sickening to think of how easily she lied, not just to me, but everyone. And the worst thing all this time, my grandma, her own mother, had no clue. I guess I trusted her so much that she ignored this stuff. I'm not able to prove this on my own. So I just plan on telling my grandma what I found out, and hopefully she'll be able to prove it, and punish my mother. I wasn't sure if just by embezzlement I could get back at my mother, so I needed a backup plan. I needed a new strategy to screw her up. Then I thought of Bart. Bart literally just showed up on the scene. They got engaged so fast. I asked some friends to help them check Bart's accounts on the internet. We eventually found out the truth. Bart wasn't who he seemed to be. There was something that didn't add up. It all seemed too rehearsed. So we did a little digging, and what we found blew our minds. Bart wasn't just a smooth-talking business guy. He was already married. Yes, married and living a double life. And not only that, his wife, who lives miles away, has no idea that he's engaged to my mother. The irony is that my mother was not only being a con artist, but she was also being conned with all this information in hand. I knew what I had to do. I wasn't just going to fight for the penthouse. I was going to expose her for what she really is, a liar, a manipulative someone who has betrayed not only me, but our entire family. But for now, I will keep gathering evidence, I will keep planning my next move, and I will keep fighting for what is right. If any of you have been through something similar, or have any legal advice, I would appreciate it. This fight isn't over, and make sure I play my cards right. Update: 4 months have passed. And after reading all your comments and Terry's and advice from people close to me, I managed to figure out what to do. I spoke directly to the person who could truly cut my mother off. My grandmother has been traveling, and the time difference was pretty bad. So it was hard to talk to her in all this time, but I finally did, and she came back. It was the most difficult conversation I have ever had in my life. She had always believed the best in my mother, and wanted to see her as the problematic daughter, who just needed a little more love and support. But the truth could no longer be ignored. I told her everything, and seeing how she received it was devastating. She had completely trusted my mother, and that trust had been broken. I could see how difficult it was for her. After all, we were talking about her daughter. But I could also see the moment when the betrayal really hit her. Despite everything, my grandmother took action. Immediately, she cut off my mom's access to the family accounts, until it was proven that she had not committed the embezzlement. Nothing more. No more lavish purchases, no more vacations at the expense of the family. But that was just the beginning. The penthouse issue was actually pretty simple. My mother had no proof that we ever talked about transferring title because, well, we never did. She falsified everything, and once that came to light, she didn't have much to go on with. That the case was over and I got the penthouse back. But throughout the whole process, I couldn't see any remorse on her face. All I saw was disappointment, maybe because she got caught, or maybe because I fought her while we tried to get my penthouse back. My grandmother spoke to her team of accountants and lawyers to review the finances, and within days they confirmed what I had suspected. My mother had been embezzling money for years, trying to cover it up with inflated spending and extravagant spending. The numbers don't lie. The damage she did was enormous. My grandmother was devastated, not only because my mother had cheated on her, but also because her son had betrayed me. She even blamed herself for everything she had been through, for failing as a mother and as a grandmother. But I assured her that she had not failed me. Finally, my grandmother disinherited my mother and removed her from the family fortune. The trust fund was finished. The business that my mother managed was fired. Effective immediately. My mother had lived her whole life surrounded by wealth and privileges, and now, in an instant, everything was taken away from her. Update. See, it has been a while, and I forgot to mention what happened with my mom and Bart. Well, after I got my penthouse back, I told Bart's wife everything and sent her all the evidence. I thought that after this my mom would finally leave Bart, who I think only wanted his money. But that was not the case. The one who ended the relationship was Bart, but I will talk about the reasons more forward. When Bart's wife found out about everything, she publicly humiliated him, and honestly, he deserved it, and he had to pay him a large sum in the divorce settlement. According to what I heard, he now lives in a small shack, if we compare it with the place where he lived before. As for my mother, now she has a place for herself alone with 3 meals a day and an hour to go out. In the yard, yes. Now she is behind bars for embezzlement of funds and falsifying documents. I could not tell them everything that was going on, because the lawyers advised me not to divulge anything. And as perhaps she could also be reading this, I preferred not to risk it. But now that everything is over and she has received 3 years in prison, I can now speak freely. About the matter, it tastes like little, but considering that he will have nothing when I get out, I feel a little more satisfied. This is also the reason why Bart left my mother. As for Bart, I have something else to tell. When I got my penthouse back, the first thing I did, it was changing the locks. It seems someone didn't warn B about this, or he just didn't care, as he tried to get in anyway. Probably because he thought he still had his stuff in the place. Or at least he thought so, because the first thing I did was throw everything that wasn't mine into the trash, or donate it to charity. So when he arrived and realized his key didn't work anymore, he started banging on the door. The building security let him in since I hadn't given orders to stop him from El Paso, as I had something prepared for him. When I realized it was him, and that he wouldn't leave without trying to get his belongings back, I put my plan into action. I called the police. You may sound a little mean, but I can't forget the day he kicked me out and said he would call the police, or how angry I felt. So it was a satisfaction, like a very hot day when the police took him away. I tried to argue that he was only there to recover some clothes, but when one of the policemen checked and found nothing of his, they simply took him away by making excuses. To be fair, if there was Bart's clothes in the penthouse, if you can call underwear with holes in it. But if Bart is reading this now, I advise him to go to the dump to look for it. It has been an interesting few months, but it feels good to be done with all this, and to be fully moved into my new home. I wasn't going to write about this again because I felt like my story had already come to an end. But, getting a call from the penitentiary is reason enough to go back. No, last week I got it. That call where you have to decide if you accept or not, and well, I don't know anyone else in the underworld. So there was no doubt it was my mother. I know I probably shouldn't have answered after everything that happened, but I honestly felt that I needed to tell her some things that had been left in the inkwell, so as not to make this longer. My mother wanted me to go visit her, and she asked me to bring her some things that she said would make her stay more comfortable. The funny thing is that he mentioned several things that belonged to him and that he would like to have there in jail. What I did was respond to him with his own logic. Mom, we are family. Not what is yours is mine and what is mine is yours. So I can't take those things. Because technically I am using them. Of course, I would never use something of his, and the truth is that I don't even know where those things are, but I think he understood the hint then to close the conversation. I told him that I hoped he would not be upset, but that I had to hang up because I was very busy. I clarified that he should not get his hopes up, thinking that I would answer his calls in the future, since I would probably be stuck with many other things, when it was his time to use the phone again. In the following days, I received more calls, asking if I would accept a call from the penitentiary, but I did not. It seems that he has finally understood my message, because for now, he has stopped calling.